morning. I'm Shawn Yao.
I'm Pauline Verzosa.
And sitting in for Ces Oreña-Drilon, I'm Gao. The big stories tonight, 42 days since its inception and 39 days of actual work. The Independent Commission for Infrastructure is opening parts of its hearings to the public. The ICI chief has also revealed a challenging time for a panel that lacks power, facility, and even manpower.
And a fire broke out at an office of the Public Works Department, the agency at the center of the corruption scandal and probe. The Ombudsman, though, is not ruling out arson just yet.
And the palace likens one private citizen to a nuisance candidate after he accused First Lady Liza Marcos of ties with a supposed bagman in anomalous flood control projects.
Once we have the technical capability, we'll be doing live stream next week. Our creation needs more powers. We don't have the facility and we don't have the rules of procedure. We will try our best. This thing is outrageous and makes me cry that how can these people get away with 500 billion pesos?
Starting next week, the Independent Commission for Infrastructure, or the ICI, will open its investigation to the public via live stream. Retired Supreme Court Justice Andres Reyes, who heads the ICI, made the announcement that senators tackled Senate Bill 1215, which seeks to expand the Commission's powers. Reyes says the decision to live stream is to ensure transparency in its inquiry, as he acknowledges public outrage on the alleged 500 billion peso infrastructure fraud.
This thing is outrageous and makes me cry that how can these people get away with 500 billion pesos? We will now go on live stream next week. Once we get to be able to have the technical capability with us already. So again, I repeat, we'll be doing live stream next week.
This was echoed by ICI member and former Public Works Secretary Rogelio Singson. Singson stresses the need to strengthen the country's anti-corruption agencies.
I could not believe what I was hearing in terms of the magnitude of the corruption. And I tried to analyze where did the system fail. It looked like it was all over. This is what we've learned so far. The procedure, the legal process that we have to follow is so tedious. Bago po may makulong, ang haba ho ng proseso.
According to Reyes, the ICI itself has been operating on limited manpower and resources considering the immensity of its probe. Now, despite the constraints, Reyes says the ICI will conduct a full-blast investigation into alleged irregularities in infrastructure projects.
Our creation needs more powers, more refinement. We will try our best to be able to full blast investigation of all this fraud. We don't have the facility and we don't have the rules of procedure, but we will already shorten the procedure.
Meantime, Trade and Industry Secretary Maria Cristina Roque was the latest cabinet secretary to be invited by the ICI. Reyes was called to explain the registration process of contractors with the Philippine Contractors Accreditation Board. Reyes reports about reforms that have been implemented in the Bicam, primarily to avoid a conflict of interest.
We need to change also, or we need to make new changes, or we need to make, improve, we need to reform, we need to make sure na yung itong mga bagong sasali or mga bagong kukuha ng lisensya are already following the new rules para hindi na maulit yung nangyari dun in the past.
In related news, the Supreme Court will still have to review the Sandigan Bayan's recommendations on how it will expedite the trial of cases in connection with the flood control scandal. Sandigan Bayan Presiding Justice Geraldine Ekong had said that Anti-Graft Court is eyeing marathon hearings on the cases to render a decision in less than 1 year. Ombudsman Boying Remulla also said that his office is considering the evaluation of the complaints in just 48 hours.
Any rules that may be proposed by any court, whether it's collegiate courts, Sandigan, CTA, and CA, will have to be reviewed by the court and bank. For sure, we will review immediately these rules and see to it that they're implemented, properly drafted.
For its part, the judiciary promises to do its part in the resolution of cases. Senior Associate Justice Marvic Leonen assures prompt action by the courts on flood control issues.
The judiciary has to remain impartial. At the end of the day, we will have to receive the evidence, and we are hoping that the cases are built up properly. When cases are finally filed, not only with the Sandigan Bayan, our regional trial courts will also have jurisdiction over this. So this is the support that we can give.
Meanwhile, Ombudsman Remulla also revealed today that one former lawmaker from Quezon City has decided to cooperate and divulge information on the flood control anomalies. Remulla did not give further details except that the person is ready to provide names allegedly involved in the scam.
Nakatanggap din ako ng tawag kaninang umaga, very early in the morning, isang kaibigan ko para siyang go-between sa isang congressman from Quezon City who wants to tell all. So, we'll wait. I will work on that. Yung involvement niya sa lahat na nangyayari. Tsaka kung paano kalakaran, paano nangyayari lahat yan.
And amid the investigation on the flood control scandal, fire raised a building in the DPWH central office in Quezon City. Thick smoke enveloped the Bureau of Research and Standards office just near Nia Road and EDSA in Barangay Piñahan around noontime. The blaze even went up to third alarm before it was finally put out at around 2 this afternoon. As per the initial investigation, the fire started from a computer unit that suddenly exploded inside the materials testing division. Now, the cause of the explosion is yet to be determined. The Bureau of Research and Standards is where the DPWH conducts research, studies, pilot testing, and formulation of government infrastructure projects. In a statement, the DPWH was quick to assure that there were no documents connected to the flood control probe destroyed by the fire. The department is also still investigating the extent of the damage. Meanwhile, the Ombudsman's office, for its part, has ordered the NBI to coordinate with the Bureau of Fire Protection to check for possible arson.
Madali naman malaman niya kung arson yun. Pero hopefully, ay natural cause yan. Pero I'm sure that there are backup documents naman pagdating dito. And it's a working day, so people were able to save their computers, hopefully, which contain the information. We're just worried that it might stifle some or become an excuse to evade responsibility, but we will not allow that.
And let's talk more about these developments with our first guest tonight. We have on the Big Story Deputy Majority Leader, Senator J.B. Ejercito. Sir, magandang gabi and thank you for joining us.
Hi, good evening, Ed. Of course, Shawn and Pauline, good evening to all of you. Magandang gabi sa inyo lahat.
Yes, sir. I suppose good news for a lot of people, live streaming ng ICI hearings. Pero wala pa tayong detalye kung ano yung papayagang ilabas at anong hindi papayagang ilabas. From your perspective po, meron bang, should there be restrictions on what what the public can see and hear?
Well, that's first of all, that's welcome news, no? Because Ed, the public, the Filipino people are all waiting for answers. Dahil dito sa manumalyang, this is the biggest scandal probably in the history. Talagang galit ang taong bayan, and itong nagsimula po yung ICI, but behind closed doors. So it's really a welcome development that they have already agreed to live stream, and so by next week, no? So
Yeah.
hopefully by next week talagang malabas na ito, but I just don't know to what extent, and ano po yung may mga bagay na na hindi papayagan, but I'm hoping, no, because just like anybody else, we are also longing for answers.
But sir, from your point of view, should everything be live streamed?
If possible, yes, in the spirit of transparency, so that we will all know what really transpired and what really happened, no, in this scandal and this modus that really rocked the whole nation.
Di ba, Sen, parang usually sa mga Senate hearings or even sa Congress, humihingi ng executive session, yun yung sinasabi ni Apa Ongpin from the Makati Business Club na baka pwede daw i-consider. But do you think, that card might be overdrawn, kumbaga gamitin lagi?
It depends. I think it will be the call of the chairman, and I think Justice Andres Reyes would be in a good position. And he will. I think we just have to trust their discretion on what if it's really worth an executive session, so to speak, na hindi is kasama sa live stream. So there are matters, no, security, personal safety, and things like that sometimes need executive session.
Okay, speaking of, let's just talk about the Blue Ribbon Committee hearings, which according to SP Tito, will be starting second week of November with possibly, most likely, Senator Ping back at the chairmanship. Yung reaction niyo po, because we last spoke and you were kind of upset, no? You said this whole thing is burning your house down. With the recent change in events, what's your assessment or your opinion on how things have fallen into place, maybe?
Now, first of all, I just wanted to be clear. I know, because I wanted really to focus on the modus, on how they did all of these things, this syndicated crime, and we should not lose focus at that time, no, na just by naming so and so personalities, baka mawala tayo sa focus. And I think it was already clarified, and when we had the majority caucus, but a lot of things happened, no, until Senator Lacson resigned, but before that, we were talking on who I was suggesting to invite, no, yung sa Mindoro, the other notorious district. I suggested that he invite the regional director there. So, but now we're hoping that I'm hoping that the best person to lead the Blue Ribbon Committee will be chosen. I could work naman with anybody, no, be it Senator Lacson, be it Senator Marcoleta, the erstwhile Blue Ribbon chairman. But there are still a lot of people who are capable, no? I think Senator Pia Cayetano, Senator Kiko Pangilinan are people who are all equally capable. So we're just hoping for the best. The majority would decide on who would be better to lead the very important committee, the Blue Ribbon Committee.
But Senator, how are talks like within the majority? Kung babalik nga po si Senator Ping Lacson as chair of the Blue Ribbon, will you be fully supporting the direction that he will take? Or magkakaroon po ba ng compromise sa kung paano i-handle ang hearings moving forward?
Well, as I mentioned, Shawn, and I can work with anybody. It will be the decision of the majority. And well, we just have to trust whoever sits as chairman and what direction they want to take. But again, I just like to remind that we should not veer away from the real focus, no? Because in terms of putting the safeguards in aid of legislation, we should really know how the modus was done, who the real culprits are, so that we can introduce legislation of safeguards so that this scam would not occur or what would not happen again in the future.
For you, Senator JV, may kulang pa po ba or missing link doon sa modus dito sa mga flood control projects?
I guess by now I have an idea on how it was done. When in case the Blue Ribbon Committee resumes, I would be pursuing that, and I had the chance also to talk to former colleagues, because I was formerly a member of the House of Representatives, and they also told me some vital information, no, that more or less gave me an idea on how they were able to do this scam, no, this modus, no. It's really a collusion. It's between meron po sa House and also the DPWH and others, no? It was really a collusion.
Pero sir, nagbabala rin si Senator Lacson na if ever he does accept the Blue Ribbon Committee chairmanship all over again, baka matanggal si Tito Soto, magbago yung mga alyansa sa Senado, magbago yung majority, and I suppose pag magbago majority, matatanggal din siya as Blue Ribbon Committee chairman. So how does that work? I mean, well, let me put it this way. Kasi sabi nyo kanina, you want to focus on the modus and not necessarily on naming people. So what do we do? What happens then if Senator Ping Lacson continues on doing what he was doing before he resigned?
Well, all I can say is that kung sino yung who the real culprits are, we should really, we should get to the bottom of this. No, as of now, I myself already have an idea who are the people behind, no? And I think their names we really have to expose their names once the Blue Ribbon Committee resumes. So, doon sa it's really this is really a difficult situation for everybody, no? I think it's not only for the Senate as an institution, it's for the government itself and for everybody everybody is sensitive, everybody is furious. So ang hirap pag nandito ang decision mo, the one sector will get mad if you're in the right, the other sector will get mad. So you just have to be very careful and be sensitive in what's really happening right now.
Can I get more details on this, Sen? This is a report from the Manila Bulletin quoting you, possibly from an ambush interview earlier today. Ejercito said Senate President Tito Soto III already clarified their stance on the ongoing hearings, and that is why he has no qualms on having Lacson back as a Senate Blue Ribbon Committee chairman. Ano po yung stance na kinlarify sa inyo ni SP Tito?
Well, I guess that was clarified before, Shawn. Yan yung sinabi na yung po nagkaroon lang kasi ng yung tungkol sa everybody's an insertion, because insertion now is such a bad terminology, a bad word, no? But we in the Senate, we're proud of our so-called institutional insertions, or now we just call it amendments, no? Because those are according to advocacy, and I think it was clarified by Senate President Tito Soto, and even Senator Lacson then said that he qualified it, no? So lang na we at least it was clarified during that time that we had the majority caucus at least I think a month ago before we went on a break.
So solid ngayon yung majority sa Senate, no shake-ups in the works?
Well, I could say that we're 15, then there's 9 minority. Kumbaga masabi nga nila manipis to, no? Yeah, manipis yun. And everybody, anytime, as I mentioned, Ed, this is a very sensitive, precarious situation. Anything can happen. But I don't think another leadership change would be good, no? Kasi we just had a leadership change again to give chance. Sabi nga nag-away na yung dalawang bahay, nagsunugan. That's what I meant by burning the house, was how the house will attack the Senate will attack the house. At least we have leadership changes to have to a reboot, so to speak. So we're hoping that we will just continue with the present leadership, because I don't think it would look good to have another leadership change, especially during this very crucial and precarious situation that we have right now.
Yun nga sir, baka may maatsingan lang baka magbago yung alyansa pag may maatsingan lang And yun nga, like you said, it's not gonna look good on the Senate if you change your leadership all over again in a matter of weeks. Especially especially with something as controversial as this, na baka there will be a perception na parang senators are protecting some of their own.
Yes, we're hoping also that, Ed, na sana if we could wrap up the Blue Ribbon Committee hearings already, and now that the ICI will be televised and will be, they already agreed to a live feed, and we're hoping that they will do a good job para hindi na very awkward. It's so difficult to investigate your own House and then Senate, and again I'm hoping for the best that we will choose the best Blue Ribbon Committee chair, and we just have to support. Marami namang capable dyan. I was offered to head it once, but I begged off because I know that, Senator Lacson, Senator Marcoleta, Senator Pia Cayetano, and others are very much capable to lead this very important committee right now.
Well, as we all know, Senator, all these hearings are in aid of legislation, but you are already pushing for Senate Bill number 2, which is the Master Plan for Infrastructure and the National Development Bill, or yung MIND. And you've actually been long advocating for this already since the 19th Congress. Pero ngayon, na prioritize na siya under LEDAC. Explain to us, Senator, how will this really prevent a repeat of the flood control fiasco?
Yes, I'm very happy that that it's the Senate Bill number 2 is now part of the priority measures. And I think the rationale behind this measure is to have a comprehensive master plan for infrastructural development, that all the long big ticket items from railway system, airports, highways, dams should follow a master plan, because it takes 20, 30, 50 years for planning, study, and execution, so that we can play catch up to our ASEAN neighbors. Second, we will hit two birds with one stone, that it can already prevent occurrence of such anomalous, we can prevent the anomalous projects, since it will now be all according to the master plan, especially the flood control. Hindi na pwede yung basta magka-project na lang left and right para alam na natin, para perahin lang, because everything now will now be according to master plan. For example, for Central Luzon, there will be a flood control master plan, that all the projects under this will have to be approved and will be under the master plan. So hopefully, if it will be passed, again, we will hit two birds with one stone. We can catch up with our infrastructure development, the railways, and everything with our ASEAN neighbors, and at the same time prevent the occurrence of another anomalous projects, that just like the floodgates scandal.
Pati maiiwasan na rin, Senator, na yung mga BGC boys, yung giving power to these district engineering offices kung saan nangyayari yung collusion. But I just wanted to point out also, Senator, you said na this might transcend different administrations dahil nga matatagal yung mga proyekto. What happens if the priorities change under the next administration? What kind of provisions will be allowed under this law?
Well, there's each president, siguro it's because of our political system na 6-year term and 3 years term. So parang nangyari sa atin is short and medium term yung planning. So, when you talk about railway system, the dams, other big ticket items, you talk about 10, 20, even up to 50 years of planning and execution. And probably that's one of the reasons why we got left behind by our ASEAN neighbors. And hopefully with this, buti nga nakahabol na tayo with the North-South Commuter Line, finally, Metro Manila Subway System, finally. Hopefully with this, whoever sits as president definitely will have their own pet programs or pet projects. But those projects that are big ticket items and under the Comprehensive Master Plan or the MIND Act will continue through the different and transcend the different presidencies. So that's the rationale behind the MIND Act or the Master Plan for Infrastructure and National Development.
Sir, huling tawad, sir. SALN naman tayo. Naglabas na ng SALN ng ilang kasama ninyo sa Senado. Ano po magiging patakaran ng Senado pagdating sa SALN? Nag-iintay po lahat. Patakaran ng Kongreso, Senado, Supreme Court, and also your individual decisions on whether you will release your SALNs.
Actually, Ed, a good question, because Senate President Soto already asked us in our WhatsApp group as to what our sentiments are. And I think more than most senators in the majority already gave their go signal to release their SALNs, including myself. I already agreed to release my SALN, but there's just some concern with some senators that there are information, like address, others will not be given for security reasons. So most of us have already agreed to release our SALNs.
Sir, actual silence, sir. Of course, with reductions. Yung may mga buburahin talaga na given naman yun eh. Pero these are actual silence, sir. I'm asking that kasi in the past, I understand, I was talking to Menelas Baños, yung Senado talaga nagbibigay pero ng SALN. Pero yung Kongreso kasi, nagbibigay lang sila dati ng summary, ang 10 richest, 10 poorest congressmen. We're hoping it's not the same with the Senate now.
Yes, I think we will be releasing, I think even if individually, no, hindi yung summary. So we will, from what I remember, all senators allowed or gave their go signal already that their SALNs be released when requested.
Okay. Thank you for joining the big story tonight, Senator J.B. Ejercito.
Right, we're just going to take a quick break, but coming up, former Speaker Martin Romualdez and the Maharlika Investment Corporation are accused of having ties with a banker convicted over Malaysia's sovereign fund scandal. Their answer to the allegation when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News.
Welcome back to the big story. Resigned Speaker Martin Romualdez denies having any ties with a convicted fraudster and money launderer. Malaysia-based news outlet Sarawak Report alleges that British-Swiss national Patrick Mahoney sat as an advisor of the Maharlika Investment Corporation. Mahoney was convicted last year for his role in an embezzlement scheme involving One Malaysia Development Berhad or 1MDB. Sarawak reported that Mahoney met with Romualdez on a frequent basis while the executive's case was still on appeal. Mahoney supposedly traveled to Manila to advise members of the MIC. The law establishing the Philippine Sovereign Wealth Fund was passed when Romualdez was still Speaker of the House of Representatives. In a statement, Romualdez calls the allegations, and we quote, unfounded, misleading, and malicious. The MIC has also previously denied links with Mahoney, calling the accusations false, baseless, and damaging.
House Speaker Boji D has released a copy of his Statement of Assets, Liabilities, and Net Worth or SALN to the public. In that SALN, D disclosed ties to 4 firms, 3 in Isabela and 1 in Pasig. His net worth is not more than 74 million pesos. D also listed 16 relatives currently holding government positions. Recall that Speaker D himself said he will publicize his SALN amid the public outrage over revelations of rampant corruption in government. And in line with the push for transparency, senators and congressmen agreed to open the bicameral conference meetings on the 2026 national budget to the public via live streaming. Even non-members of the Bicam are allowed or welcome to attend. And to save on expenses, the Bicam plans to conduct their deliberations in PICC in Pasay as opposed to the usual hotel venues. The Office of the Ombudsman welcomes this move, saying that transparency in legislative deliberations strengthens public trust and ensures accountability in governance.
And we discussed the national budget some more with House Appropriations Committee Chairperson Mika Swansing, who joins us now live here in the studio. Maraming salamat for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much, Sir Ed, Ma'am Shawn, and Ma'am Pauline. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Don't call us sir and ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay. We want to talk about a lot of things, including, of course, yung unprogrammed appropriations and yung live streaming. But let me back up a bit more. Of course, the Bicam was originally supposed to, to be a mechanism to reconcile differing versions of the House and the Senate for whatever bill is up for deliberation. As a general rule now, what's going to be the rule as far as what is going to be allowed in the Bicam for the GAA?
Yes. So generally, I've actually had the chance to meet with my Senate counterpart, the chairman of the Committee on Finance, Senator Win Gatchalian, on this matter. And something that we discussed is that we want to focus on the disagreeing provisions between the House version and the Senate version of the General Appropriations Bill. Definitely something that we want to avoid is to have like a completely different body that would kind of revamp the whole of the two versions.
So reconciliation.
It's really going to be
parang
more...
political reconciliation yan.
It's going to be really definitely...
Yun naman talaga yung true spirit ng
original
Bicam.
talaga ng Bicam.
So
Reconcile.
Yes. So, and one, so it's going to be mostly focused on reconciling the differences between the two versions. And second, we want to make it open and transparent. So thus the move towards opening the bicameral conference committee proceedings.
Pero ano yung parameters, just in case, yeah, even if it's open, transparent, and all that, and live stream, just in case somebody wants to, to make a radical proposal or insertion, if you want to call it that. What happens then?
Yeah.
That's what I mean. What are the parameters that we're going to be looking at and excluding from the Bicam process now? Kasi, originally it was supposed to be a reconciliation mechanism, but things have changed over the years.
Yeah, so definitely if a member of the bicameral conference committee conferees from either side of the House would want to introduce a particular amendment, it would have to be put on the floor as a motion. And then the conferees themselves would have to decide right then and there whether it's something that can be entertained or not. But definitely, if the concern of the public is with regard to, for example, flood control projects, which we have been very, very adamant about, that there would be no longer be any flood control projects in the 2026 budget, definitely we have to shoot something like that down. If that's an amendment that someone would introduce during the Bicam, definitely that's a big no on the part of the House. The President himself has also said that he will not entertain any item pertaining to flood control projects in the 2026 budget. So we have those kinds of guidance at the moment, but hopefully wala naman na pong mag-introduce na something like that.
Naisip ko lang kasi malikot yung utak ko. What if, because everyone's looking at FCP sa flood control projects, what if napunta siya sa iba?
May bagong pumasok naman na
some other thing,
may nag-akap muli.
Actually, one budget watcher said it's not just flood control, it's actually the road networks. So that's the bulk of the DPWH budget, and it's still there. The bulk of the budget is still there, Kong.
Yeah. So maybe I could address that in particular. So in terms of the road network, so I worked with Sec Vince Dizon, right, a lot over the previous months in making sure that the second version of the DPWH budget, which would be submitted to the House, would already be void of all the red flag items that were raised by the House during the first hearing of the DPWH budget. And I have faith in the good people of DPWH. I know that we gave them around 13 days, if I'm not mistaken, between the first hearing when it was deferred and the second submission. And they really did not sleep for those 13 days just to go over every single line item. The DPWH budget is around 700 pages long, but they really did their best effort to already take out all of those questionable items.
So nasuyod yun. Confident ka as APRO chair na nasuyod yung budget?
Actually, Sec Vince himself, though, when he submitted the second version, said hingi lang sila ng konting wiggle room, only because there may be like a little bit of mistakes in terms of sectioning and things like that. Maybe there are certain duplicate projects that they may have missed, but those are in good faith naman. It's really just, it was a function of the limited time that was given to them to revise the budget. But generally, I know that the DPWH family really worked hard to make sure that all of those questionable items are out in the second version of the DPWH budget.
Congresswoman, the bone of contention now for a lot of budget watchers and even the public are the programmed appropriations. Lots of question marks when it comes there. And JC Punong Bayan did say that for next year's budget, parang there was a sneaky insertion or something new introduced, and that's giving more power to the executive through the DBM secretary to approve the releases of projects or funds for projects under UA. Hindi ba talaga ganon yung sistema, Kong? Is that...
Actually, if he's pertaining to special provision number 9 or 10, if we moved it, because we changed special provision number 1. Special provision number 9 already was there in the previous GAS. And special provision 9, in effect, says that the DBM is authorized to, 1, approve disbursements under UA, and 2nd, reallocate within unprogrammed appropriations across particular purposes. So it's not something new. That special provision has been there higher since the previous gas. So maybe that's what he's referring to, but DBM has always had the authority to disburse unprogrammed appropriations.
What about the education budget? I know you've bumped it up, but I'm so sorry to quote the budget watchers again, pero at least para harap-harapan natin ma-address. They're saying, yes, malaki siya, but also na pinasok din daw doon yung mga retirement benefits and parang pensions yata of education workers. Is that true?
Actually, in terms of the base for the, because the NEP level for the budget for the whole education sector was at 1.22 trillion pesos. And that's the base that we used on the part of the House. That came from the DBM. And then the way that we were able to come up with the current level of 1.28 trillion pesos is we added the roughly 56 billion pesos that we added on the part of the House. So that's how we came up with it. So if ako kasi, the retirement benefits of teachers would also have to go towards the education budget because essentially that's a right that our educators get. So we are very much open, us on the part of the House and also the DBM would be open to have that conversation with the budget observers to kind of align on the assumptions, the parameters that we use to come up with a figure.
But where else could it go, you think? Because sometimes, di ba, may mga, kumbaga yung DepEd, nag-build ng classroom, pero hindi daw nila yung strength, so napunta sa DPWH, tapos ngayon, hindi naman na-build yung classroom. So, minsan nagkakapasahan because supposedly it's not the strength of this or it doesn't actually belong to this mandate. Where do you think you could, put in those things? I mean, yes, they're important.
Yes, definitely. So for the BEF, for fiscal year 2026, we work closely with Secretary Sonny Angara, and we now modify the special provision pertaining to the build-out construction of classrooms. So previously, there were only two options. You only have either DepEd or DPWH building the classrooms. But for fiscal year 2026, to avoid that situation again, there are now four options. So DepEd, DPWH, LGUs, and the President himself also mentioned that earlier today, and lastly, PPPs, public-private partnerships. So hopefully, given that you have four modes for fiscal year 2026, we would avoid a situation where there's underutilization of the funds under the Basic Education Facilities Program.
I know you've emphasized that you made a big cut in the unprogrammed appropriations, I think by a third from 360, it's down by 120
Yes.
from this year. But my question is it in any way possible to completely do away with unprogrammed appropriations or at least reduce it to below 100 billion so that parang walang panukso ba?
Yes, I've actually been very vocal about that over the previous days, that the House is not adamant in keeping the whole 240 billion pesos. But thank you very much, Ed, for raising that the level of unprogrammed appropriations for 2026 is 120 billion pesos lower than it was in 2025, which is around 360 billion. There are certain items within the unprogrammed appropriations that we believe would have to be retained because these are our commitments to our foreign international development partners like the World Bank, JICA, COICA, and ADB. So those amount to about 113 billion out of the 240 billion. We also have here the AFP modernization component, which is around 50 billion. And there's the previous SAGIP, which is a bit controversial because that's where a lot of the flood control projects were pulled from in the previous years. So SAGIP now is no longer SAGIP. We've taken out the letter I in SAGIP.
The infrastructure.
So infrastructure is totally disallowed now. It's no longer an authorized purpose under unprogrammed appropriation. So now it's only now focused on the social programs, so government social programs. So only those pertaining to DSWD, DOH, PhilHealth, SSS, and SHEDs for scholarships. So if you add those three items, 113 plus 50 plus 45, you're already at 200 plus billion out of 240 billion. So as I have always said, we are open to reducing the level of unprogrammed appropriations. I've always said that. I know the sentiments of our friends in the Senate with regard to unprogrammed appropriations. And between now and the Bicam, the House is very much open to discussing with them on how we can best rationalize the level of unprogrammed appropriations.
I know you've said in your press con that you're very open kung may suggestion yung Senate, kung ano pwede gawin to rationalize and even further cut the amount, total amount for UA, you'll be okay with those suggestions. No?
Yes.
But let's focus on the, okay, tinanggal niyo yung I sa SAGIP, so SAGP, social programs, but that was also one of the, again, to use Pawi's term, another bone of contention yan. Di ba? What safeguards did you put in this time to make sure? I know it's not an election year, so it's probably not that mainit. No? But what did you have to do there to make sure na hindi na to magalaw?
Yes. So that's a question that was posed to me a lot. Like, is there any, the term that was thrown to me was, is there any backdoor mechanism by which flood control projects and other infrastructure projects like roads and bridges can be funded through unprogrammed appropriations? Wala na po. If you would look at the 11 items under unprogrammed appropriations, and I believe I have shared the same, and it's being flashed on the screen. Out of the 11 items that are there, wala na pong pwedeng pagpasukan ng flood control projects because the only projects that are allowed there would be those pertaining, the infrastructure projects pertaining to foreign assisted projects. So definitely no locally funded flood control projects, bridges, or roads can be funded under unprogrammed appropriations.
But what I mean is yung mismong social amelioration programs itself, AKAP, TUPAD, MAIFEB,
Yes, understood. So the only reason why, and it's being flashed here right now, that is the component of the current social strengthening assistance for social programs amounting to 45 billion. If you would see there's an amount in the last row pertaining to DSWD. And the only reason why we have things like that there is I will use the case for this year as an example. So when the earthquakes and the typhoons in Masbate, Cebu, and Davao hit, there was no longer any fund within DSWD's AIX. So what was there that was initially programmed under the 2025 GAA was already at zero. So, but then the government had to quickly respond to help the victims of the calamities. And that's the reason why the government released 5 billion pesos from unprogrammed appropriations for AIX. And if this is not there, then there would not have been a way or a legal basis for the government to release the funds right away for calamity victims. So if you would see here, the amounts are low for each of the items. So the 45 billion does not pertain to just one item. It's really split across. Yes. So in terms of the cap is quite low for it to be prone to abuse. So it's really just there as a standby fund in case there are emergencies. Another example as well, during the time of COVID, when the government had to quickly release allowances and support for health workers and frontline workers, those were pulled from unprogrammed appropriations. So it's really, so unprogrammed appropriations have been in effect for such a long time, and I understand the concern of the public because in previous years it has been the source for questionable flood control projects that were released. But the assurance that I can give our countrymen is that for fiscal year 2026, we have put in the necessary safeguards to make sure that doesn't happen again.
But don't we have already flexible funds within the budget, like the President's contingency fund, also the NDRRMF, among other things. I think there's one more embedded in the departments. So don't we have already enough flexi funds?
I agree. So the NDRRMF, or the Calamity Fund, has about 30 billion pesos in the 2026 budget. But I will use again the example of the SWD AIX for 2025. Even the QRF, the Quick Response Fund within the DSWD, which was 1.75 billion roughly, was already exhausted. And for this year, we increased the NDR-RMF by another 10 billion. So 20 billion in the 2025 budget, 30 billion in the 2026 budget. So that is why we want to stick with the programmed appropriations. I agree. Ideally, we want to stick with what's there, programmed within the departments, plus the calamity fund or the contingent funds.
So in very simple terms, it's a backup plan of a backup plan.
Yes, exactly.
Plan C, ganun.
Yeah, I think a lot of, one question that's on a lot of people's minds is, ganun ba karaming excess funds ang Pilipinas to fund our unprogrammed appropriations? We're talking about 240 billion plus, and some have even questioned the source of funds ng UA, yung cash sweep na tinatawag, di ba? It was controversial because some watchers said it came from PDIC, it came from PhilHealth, and they just funded flood control projects in the past. How will we avoid something like that? Or tama po ba talaga ang cash sweep? May ganung mechanism ba ang gobyerno?
Actually, to be honest, like in terms of how they funded the unprogrammed appropriations in the 2024 or the 2023 budget, I'm honestly not privy to that information, as I assumed leadership of the Committee on Appropriations just this year, just for this Congress. But essentially, what we're looking at is, I was looking at the utilization rate of the previous unprogrammed appropriations. And looking at it, even though the unprogrammed appropriations were high, roughly 30% were utilized. So not the whole amount. For example, for 2025, I believe for AFP modernization, there's zero utilization rate and things like that. So even though there's 240 billion under unprogrammed appropriations for 2026, based on historical data and historical utilization, roughly only 30% of that would end up getting funded in the next year.
Okay, well,
And mostly mostly foreign assisted projects. That is the #1 priority, as I have seen.
And for AFP modernization, parang may 50 billion yata that's still under unprogrammed.
Yes.
And there's 40 na program.
Yes.
Is that because mababa yung utilization rate nila from the last year?
Yeah. Actually, the reason why we have 50, because using the AFP modernization law, roughly there should be around 130 billion in funding given to the AFP for the AFP modernization program. But given the limited fiscal space, we were only able to fund 40 billion of that under programmed appropriation. So that's the only reason why we have 50 billion on standby, just in case additional funds would be made available. But again, as I have seen in the 2025 utilization rate thus far, 0% pa po yung utilization for, unprogrammed appropriations.
Unprogrammed, okay.
So, ibig sabihin po, none of the excess funds thus far have been put towards AFP modernization. So, even though there's 50 billion there, there's a huge possibility that it may not be funded at all under unprogrammed appropriations in 2026.
Let me go back to the Bicam. Sorry, my first question kanina was about what would be the rules with the Bicam, considering it's supposed to be reconciling conflicting versions of the House and the Senate. What if and I get your point about the flood control projects, but what if, kahit hindi flood control project, what if one of the Bicam members makes a proposal that is not in any way in conflict between the two chambers, an entirely new proposal? Let's put this in, let's make this insertion, let's call it that. Let's make this insertion there, and that's it, the proposal's on the table. Is there any rule that says that we cannot do that because that's not a proposal made by any of the two chambers, and there's therefore no conflict?
Right. So in terms of that, we would have to sit down with the Senate still to come up with the procedures and the guidelines and the rules of engagement for the Bicam, the upcoming Bicam.
Is that going to be like an actual document? That
a rule.
A rule na pipirmahan ninyo.
Parang house
like
rules ba?
Yeah.
Parang house rules.
Usually in the past, so I'm just basing off my experiences in other Bicams for bills. I have never been part of the Bicam for a budget yet. This would be my first time.
Might not be a bad thing.
Yeah. This is the first time. And I keep telling everyone that I was not at all involved in the budget process last Congress. So now, from what I've experienced in other Bicams, there's no written document different in terms of like what rules are followed. But given the current developments, given the big reforms, open Bicam, allowing other observers to come in and watch, I wouldn't be surprised if the House and the Senate would all of a sudden say, maybe we need to draft like guidelines in writing, the new procedures, the new rules for the bicameral conference committee proceedings. So we'll update you once we get that conversation rolling with the Senate.
Pahabol lang, what about the live streaming? Anything with the live streaming? Any rule that you want to impose on the live streaming? Or is it completely open to the public? Lahat ng bumahin makikita ng tao bayan.
Dagdag ko lang din, Kong, no? Because some are doubtful that it could just be performative or basically it's what you guys want the public to see, but there could still be a lot of things happening behind the scenes. So what assurance can you give the public to assuage their fears?
So in terms of that, first, I have done it in the other deliberations. So, for example, the Budget Amendments Review Subcommittee, which we have done for the first time in the House to abolish the small committee, the whole 20 hours of that, like, be it, even though it was so tedious, like even the special provisions, even the general provisions, which generally don't even see the light of day, were now made public. So, I would want to see the same in the bicameral conference committee proceeding. So, I want it to be televised in as many platforms, or broadcasted, Facebook, YouTube, and like other forms of media. In terms of that, we can assure the public that we want to be as open and transparent. So whichever conversations, I believe Senator Gatchalian has said in a previous interview which he had, was that if ever there would be offline discussions, it would really more of an alignment in terms of the procedures and the rules of engagement. But in terms of the substantive contents of the Bicam, which are the actual amendments that would be put in, the assurance that we could give the public is we will make sure that those are open, transparent, and are broadcasted to the public.
Ready na kami panoorin yun lahat.
Marathon, ano yan? Marathon viewing.
Okay, best of luck. Maraming salamat for joining us tonight. That was House Appropriations Committee Chairperson Mika Swansing.
Moving on to another story, the congressman who meows is in the news again, and not exactly for the right reason. Cavite Representative Kiko Barzaga has been delisted as an Army reservist effective September 21 after committing a grave offense under the AFP's rules and regulations. Army spokesperson Colonel Louis de Maala said that Barzaga got the axe after insinuating sedition in a September 21 post while donning his military uniform. That was the same day anti-corruption rallies were held across Metro Manila. Now, in response to his delistment, Barzaga accused the armed forces of having ghost projects.
Time to pause for another quick break, but right after that, the palace dismisses as a mere errand boy one private citizen calling for a probe on First Lady Liza Marcos. The details of that and other stories next. Keep it here on One News. The Big Story is back with the latest on the weather. Tropical Depression Salome was last spotted some 215 kilometers north-northeast of Itbayat, Batanes. It is slowly moving west-southwest with sustained winds of 55 kilometers per hour and gustiness of up to 70 kph. Pag-asa says Salome may make landfall over Batanes tonight or tomorrow morning and will weaken by Friday. Tropical cyclone wind signal number 1 is currently up over Batanes, the western portion of Babuyan Islands, and the northwestern portion of Ilocos Norte.
Like a nuisance candidate out on an errand. That's how Palace Press Officer Claire Castro describes a private citizen who went to the Independent Commission for Infrastructure on Tuesday. Jan Santander submitted a letter of sentiment to the ICI urging the fact-finding body to investigate First Lady Liza Araneta Marcos and businessman Maynard Ngu. Santander believes that there is a connection between the two and that this link leads to the flood control project fiasco. In a media briefing today, Undersecretary Castro dismisses Santander's allegations. She also clarifies that Ngu is no longer special envoy to China for trade, investments, and tourism since August this year.
Para siyang isang nuisance candidate. na parang binigyan ng pera para bumili ng suka at isinabay ang pagbibigay ng letter of sentiment para dalhin sa ICI. Kung inyo makakahalubilo muli ang isang John Santander, maaari po ba niyong itanong sa kanya kung alam ba niya ang mandato ng ICI? Siya po ba'y may personal knowledge sa kanyang mga sinasabi? Dahil kung walang personal knowledge, ito ay magsisilbing hearsay evidence. Kung hearsay evidence, ito po ba dapat ay binibigyan pa ng pagtutuon at seryosong konsiderasyon? Ito po ba ay isang fishing expedition lamang para siraan ang unang ginang?
All right, and before we go, here is our big picture tonight. Take a look at football players aiming their kicks at one tarpaulin that reads, "Sipain ang corruption." Here's that photo. Students from the Claret School of Quezon City held a friendly football match this afternoon dubbed Penalty Shootout Against Corruption. The match was a way to raise awareness about corruption and poor governance. At some point, the players kicked the tarpaulin itself as a way to express their anger.
They were so young.
Right?
I was expecting older kids, but they were little kids.
I think that's also
Yeah,
a good takeaway from everything that's happening. You have ordinary citizens, even young people talking about corruption. They're so involved.
Yeah.
Actually, outside of the workplace, I get to talk to a lot of people.
Everyone,
about
diba,
it.
wants to ask
Parang
you about the
involved.
latest
Oo.
update.
Well, beyond a certain age, everybody's young. So
I have to agree with you on that, Anne.
Kasama pa tayo lahat doon sa young.
We like that value.
Okay yan.
All right, and that's it for the big story this midweek. Thank you so much for watching.
We're back here tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. We'll see you then.
Kapatid, we are one news, all sides, all the time.